Marcus Thompson adjusted his silver cufflinks for the third time, his reflection staring back from the ornate mirror in the church's preparation room. Today was supposed to be perfect, the culmination of 2 years of careful planning with Victoria Hayes, the woman who had brought stability and purpose to his otherwise chaotic life as a freelance photographer. "Stop fidgeting," David Martinez, his best man, chuckled while straightening his own tie. "You look like you're about to photograph a war zone, not marry the love of your life." Marcus managed a smile, though something indefinable gnawed at his chest. Perhaps it was the weight of commitment, or maybe the lingering echo of a decision he'd made 3 weeks ago, sending a wedding invitation to Cassandra Brooks, his ex-girlfriend, who had vanished from his life 4 years earlier without explanation. It was the right thing to do, he had told himself then. Closure. Moving forward properly. The church bells chimed, signaling the ceremony's beginning. St. Catherine's Chapel buzzed with the gentle murmur of guests settling into polished wooden pews. Victoria's mother, Janet, had insisted on white roses and baby's breath. Classic, timeless, safe. Everything Victoria embodied. Marcus took his position at the altar beside Father Miguel, who offered an encouraging nod. The organ's opening. Notes of Pachelbel's canon filled the sacred space, and Marcus felt his heartbeat synchronize with the familiar melody. This was it, its new beginning. The wedding party processed down the aisle with practiced precision. Helen, his sister, and Victoria's maid of honor beamed at him with tears already threatening her carefully applied mascara, each carrying simple bouquets that complemented their soft lavender dresses. Then came Victoria. Radiant in her grandmother's restored lace gown, her father's proud arm guiding her toward their future. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion, not the overwhelming passion he'd once known, but something deeper, more sustainable, security, partnership, love built on solid ground rather than shifting sand. The ceremony began with Father Miguel's warm welcome to their gathered family and friends. Victoria's hand found Marcus's as they exchanged the opening vows they'd written together during quiet evenings in her cozy apartment. Surrounded by her collection of Jane Austen novels and his photography equipment. "Dearly beloved," Father Miguel began, his voice carrying easily through the chapel. "We are gathered here today to witness and celebrate the union of Marcus and Victoria in holy matrimony." Marcus squeezed Victoria's hand gently, noting how perfectly her engagement ring caught the afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, exactly as they'd rehearsed, until the chapel door creaked open. A collective, subtle shift rippled through the congregation, heads turning almost imperceptibly, a change in the atmosphere that Marcus felt before he saw its cause. His eyes found the disturbance at the back of the church, his carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. Cassandra Brooks stood in the doorway. It's more beautiful than his memory had preserved. Her dark hair was shorter now, framing her face in a way that highlighted the sharp intelligence of her green eyes. She wore a simple navy dress that spoke of understated elegance rather than attention-seeking drama. But it wasn't Cassandra alone that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Beside her stood a little girl, perhaps 3 years old, with soft, auburn curls that caught the light exactly as Marcus's own hair did in his childhood photographs. The child's eyes wide, curious, and unmistakably the same unusual shade of hazel that Marcus saw in mirrors, surveyed the scene with quiet. Observation time seemed suspended. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened almost imperceptibly, her peripheral vision catching his sudden stillness. Father Miguel continued speaking, but the words became distant echoes as Marcus stared across the chapel at a truth he wasn't yet ready to comprehend. Cassandra's eyes met his across the rows of guests, and in that moment he saw everything: apology, determination, and a profound sadness that spoke of years of carrying impossible secrets. The little girl tugged at Cassandra's hand, whispering something that made several nearby guests turn to look. Their resemblance to Marcus was unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely devastating to everything he thought he knew about his life. Asterisk. Father Miguel's voice continued the familiar cadence of the wedding ceremony. but Marcus felt as though he were drowning in plain sight. His peripheral vision caught Victoria's questioning glance, her blue eyes searching his face for an explanation he couldn't provide. The weight of 100 guests' attention pressed down on him, yet all he could focus on was the little girl, who had unconsciously tilted her head in exactly the same way he did when concentrating on a difficult photograph. "Marcus," Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible above Father Miguel's reading from Corinthians. "Are you all right?" he managed. A slight nod, though his hands had begun to tremble. Cassandra had quietly taken a seat in the very back pew, lifting the child Ruby, his mind supplied without permission, remembering Cassandra had always loved that Naman to her lap. The little girl's legs swung gently, her patent leather shoes catching the colored light from the stained glass windows. David, standing slightly behind Marcus, leaned forward with concern. "Breathe, man," he murmured, so quietly only Marcus could hear. "Whatever it is, just breathe." But breathing felt impossible. Marcus's mind raced through calculations he'd never wanted to make. For years since Cassandra had disappeared, the child appeared to be 3, perhaps approaching 4. The timeline aligned with devastating precision, like pieces of a puzzle he'd never known he was supposed to solve. "Father." Miguel reached the part of the ceremony where he asked if anyone had objections to the union. The traditional pause that usually passed in reverent silence stretched endlessly. Marcus's eyes found Cassandra's across the chapel, and she gave the slightest shake of her head. She hadn't come to object. She'd come for something else entirely. "Then let us proceed with the exchange of vows," Father Miguel announced. His warm smile encompassing both Marcus and Victoria, Victoria began speaking the words they'd crafted. Together, during evenings filled with wine and laughter, promises of partnership and growth, of building something lasting together. Her voice carried clearly through the chapel, steady and sure, while Marcus felt his world crumbling with each syllable. "Marcus has brought light into my life in ways I never expected," Victoria said, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. "He sees beauty in ordinary moments and has taught me to do the same. I promise to support his dreams, to laugh with him through life's adventures, and to choose him every day, not just today." The congregation murmured appreciation for her heartfelt words. Janet dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while Victoria's father beamed with paternal pride. Everything was perfect, exactly as they'd planned, except for the little girl in the back pew who had just whispered, "Mama, why is everyone so quiet?" In a voice that carried further than intended, Marcus felt his rehearsed vows evaporate from his memory. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The silence stretched uncomfortably long, guests beginning to shift in their seats. Helen's encouraging smile faltered as she noticed his distress. "Marcus," Father Miguel prompted gently, "your vows." Marcus began, then stopped. His eyes found Cassandra again, and this time he saw her own tears threatening to spill. She mouthed something that looked like "I'm sorry," but he couldn't be certain from this distance. Victoria's hand squeezed his more firmly, grounding him in the present moment. "Take your time," she whispered, mistaking his paralysis for wedding nerves rather than existential crisis. Finally, Marcus found his voice, though it sounded foreign to his own ears. "Victoria, you are... He paused, gathering strength from somewhere deep within. "You are everything good and constant in a world that often feels chaotic. You've given me peace when I didn't know I needed it, and stability when I didn't know I was searching for it." The words felt hollow even as he spoke them, not because they weren't true, but because a 3-year-old girl with his eyes was sitting 30 feet away, representing a truth that made everything else feel fragile and uncertain. "I promise to be worthy of your trust," he continued, the irony of those words cutting deep. "To choose honesty over comfort, and to face whatever challenges life brings us together." Even as he spoke of honesty, Marcus felt the weight of the enormous revelation sitting in the back pew. Ruby had grown restless and was now standing on the seat beside Cassandra, her small hands pressed against the wooden back of the pew in front. Of her, from this new vantage point, her resemblance to Marcus became even more apparent to anyone who cared to look, and people were beginning to look. Marcus caught David's sharp intake of breath, saw Helen's hand fly to her mouth as recognition. dawned. The whispers started subtly, guests leaning toward each other, eyebrows raising, meaningful glances exchanged. The perfect wedding ceremony was developing cracks, and Marcus realized with growing certainty that by the time Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, everyone in the chapel would understand what he was only beginning to comprehend: his daughter. And he was increasingly certain that's what she was, had just changed everything. Asterisk. The moment Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus felt the words land like stones in still water, creating ripples that would never settle back to their original calm. Victoria's kiss was soft and familiar, tasting of the peppermint lip balm she always wore, but Marcus's mind was elsewhere, calculating years, remembering conversations, trying to understand how his entire life had been rewritten in the span of 20 minutes. The recessional music began. Marcus found himself walking back down the aisle with Victoria's arm linked through his, her radiant smile a stark contrast to the turmoil churning in his chest. As they passed each row of guests, the congratulations felt muted, distant. His eyes sought Cassandra and Ruby, but their pew was empty. They left during the kiss, Helen whispered as she reached them in the receiving line outside the chapel. Her face was pale, her earlier joy replaced by concern. "Marcus, we need to talk." "Not now," he managed through gritted teeth. His photographer's smile fixed in place as Victoria's Grayton approached with enthusiastic congratulations. But the damage was spreading like watercolor on wet paper. Marcus caught fragments of whispered conversations as guests filed past. "Did you see that little girl?" The resemblance was uncanny. Poor Victoria, on her wedding day of all days. Victoria herself seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, basking in the joy of well-wishers and the relief of a ceremony completed without major incident. "That was perfect," she murmured to Marcus during a brief lull. "Absolutely perfect." Marcus nodded, but his eyes scanned the church grounds. A flash of navy fabric caught his attention near the parking area. Cassandra, carrying Ruby toward a silver sedan. Without thinking, he took a step in their direction. "Marcus." Victoria's voice pulled him back. "The photographer wants us for pictures before we lose the good light." The next hour passed in a blur of posed smiles and formal shots. Marcus moved through the motions automatically, his professional experience with cameras making it easy to anticipate the photographer's needs. But every smile felt carved from stone, every laugh forced through clenched teeth. During the cocktail hour before reception dinner, Marcus finally found his opportunity. "I need some air," he told Victoria, who was deep in conversation with her college roommates about honeymoon plans. "Don't be too long," she said, reaching up to straighten his tie with the casual intimacy of new marriage. "Janet wants to do the toast before dinner." Marcus slipped away from the reception hall and found himself in the parking lot, scanning for the silver sedan. His heart hammered against his ribs as he spotted it near the far edge of the lot. Sandra was buckling Ruby into a car seat, speaking to her in the gentle, patient tone he remembered from their time together. "Cassandra." She froze at the sound of his voice, her hands stilling on the safety straps. Slowly she turned to face him, and Marcus saw years of carefully controlled emotion threatening to break free. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly. "Congratulations." Up close, Ruby was even more unmistakably his daughter. The same stubborn cowlick at her hairline, the same thoughtful expression he'd seen in his own childhood photos. She looked up at him with curious, intelligent eyes. "Mama, who's that?" Ruby asked, pointing at Marcus with the directness only children possessed. Cassandra's breath caught. This is Marcus's sweetheart, an old friend of Mama's." "He looks like me," Ruby observed matter-of-factly, then returned her attention to the small tablet Cassandra had handed her. The simple statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stared at Cassandra, searching her face for confirmation of what he already knew in his bones. "She's mine, isn't she?" he whispered, the words barely audible even to himself. Tears spilled down Cassandra's cheeks as she nodded. "Her name is Ruby Catherine Brooks. She'll be 4 in November." Marcus's mind immediately calculated backward to February 4. Years ago, the month before Cassandra had vanished without explanation, leaving only a brief note about needing to figure things out. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question emerged hoarse with 4 years of accumulated pain and confusion. I tried, Cassandra said, her voice breaking. I was going to, and then I found out about Victoria. You were so happy, Marcus. You'd moved on, found someone stable and perfect for you? What was I supposed to do? Show up pregnant and destroy that? You were supposed to tell me I had a daughter? The words came out louder than intended, and Marcus glanced around to ensure they weren't attracting attention from the reception. I was scared, Cassandra admitted. Scared you'd think I was trying to trap you. Scared you'd resent her. Scared you'd try to take her away from me? I was 26 and working at a nonprofit. You were building your photography business and talking marriage with someone else. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, disturbing the careful styling Victoria had insisted upon. So you just ... disappeared for 4 years. Let me think you didn't want me. I thought it was kinder than the alternative. Kinder. Marcus's voice cracked. Cassandra, I spent months wondering what I'd done wrong. I blamed myself for driving you away. Ruby looked up from her tablet, sensing the emotional intensity, even if she didn't understand it. Mama, why are you crying? Cassandra quickly wiped her cheeks. Happy tears, baby. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy to see old friends. The innocent lie cut through Marcus's anger, replacing it with a profound sense of loss for all the moments he'd missed. First words, first steps, bedtime stories, scraped knees, Christmas mornings, 4 years of his daughter's life gone. I need to know everything, he said quietly. Her favorite color, what she likes for breakfast, if she's afraid of thunderstorms. Everything. Marcus, Cassandra said gently. You just got married. Victoria is probably wondering where you are. As if summoned by her name, Victoria appeared at the edge of the parking lot, her wedding dress gleaming in the early evening light. She approached slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding as she took in the scene. Marcus's obvious distress, Cassandra's tear-stained face, and the little girl who bore an unmistakable resemblance to her new husband, Marcus. Victoria's voice was carefully controlled. Is everything all right? The 3 adults stood in a triangle of impossible tension, while Ruby, oblivious to the adult complications surrounding her, hummed quietly to herself and traced patterns on her tablet screen. Marcus looked at his wife of less than 3 hours, then at the mother of his child, then at the daughter he'd never known existed. There was no right answer, no perfect solution that would leave everyone unscathed. The perfect wedding day was over. The real complexity of life was just beginning. Asterisk. Victoria's composure cracked slowly, like ice under spring sun. She stood in her grandmother's wedding dress, surrounded by the detritus of what should have been the happiest day of her life. Watching her husband of 3 hours grapple with a revelation that changed everything they'd built together. She's yours, Victoria said quietly. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't sound like betrayal or excuse. Ruby looked up from her tablet, sensing the shift. In adult energy with the intuitive radar children possessed for emotional storms, I should go, Cassandra said, moving to close the car door, but Victoria's voice stopped her. Wait. Victoria approached the car slowly, her heels clicking against the asphalt. She knelt carefully beside Ruby's car seat, mindful of her dress. Hello, sweetheart. What's your name? Ruby, the little girl answered shyly, then added with the pride of someone who'd recently mastered the skill. Ruby Catherine Brooks. I'm almost 4. It's a beautiful name, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the tears Marcus could see gathering in her eyes. I'm Victoria.
Oh.
You look like a princess, Ruby observed with the honest admiration of childhood. Victoria's laugh was watery but genuine. Thank you. That's very kind. The wedding photographer appeared at the edge of the parking lot, camera raised hopefully. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were losing the light for the sunset shots. Not now, Marcus said sharply, then caught himself. Please. We need a few minutes. The photographer retreated, but Marcus knew their time was limited. Soon, the reception guests would notice the missing bride and groom, and Janet would organize a search party that would discover this impossible scene. We need to talk properly, Marcus said, looking between Victoria and Cassandra. All of us, but not here. I have a hotel room, Cassandra offered hesitantly. The Hampton Inn on 5th Street. Victoria stood slowly, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. The reception, she said automatically. Our guests are waiting. Victoria, Marcus began, but she held up a hand. I need to think, she said. I can't process this right now with 100 people waiting for us to cut cake in half. Our first dance, the next hour, was surreal. Victoria excused herself to the bridal suite, claiming she needed to touch up her makeup. Marcus found David and pulled him aside, explaining in clipped sentences that there was a family emergency, and they needed to make excuses for the bride and groom's absence. What kind of family emergency? David pressed, his loyalty to Marcus warring with his confusion. The kind that changes everything, Marcus said grimly. Meanwhile, Helen approached Cassandra, who had lingered near the reception hall's entrance with Ruby. I'm Helen, Marcus's sister, she said, extending her hand. I remember you. Cassandra shook it warily. I remember you too. You were in graduate school when when you disappeared, Helen finished. He was devastated, I know, Cassandra said quietly. I never wanted to hurt him. Ruby tugged at Cassandra's dress. Mama, I'm hungry. Helen knelt down to Ruby's level, studying the little girl's features with the fascination of someone discovering a new branch on the family tree. There's lots of good food inside. Would you like to come with me to get some? Can we, Mama? Ruby asked. It was Helen who made the decision that would reshape the evening. Instead of allowing the situation to fester in secrecy, she guided Cassandra and Ruby into the reception hall, past the curious glances of guests, and seated them at a corner table where Tom, Marcus's younger brother, was nursing a beer and scrolling. Through his phone, Helen said firmly. Meet your niece. Tom looked up, saw Ruby, and nearly choked on his drink. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Ruby had the same stubborn jawline that ran through all the Thompson men. The same way of tilting her head when listening intently. Holy ... Tom caught himself before the profanity escaped. Does Marcus? No, he just found out, Helen said, settling Ruby into a chair and signaling a server for a child's plate. And before you ask, yes, Victoria knows too. The ripple effect was inevitable. Within 30 minutes, half the reception knew something momentous was happening. Janet, Victoria's mother, approached Helen with the predatory instinct of someone sensing family drama. Where are Marcus and Victoria? People are asking about the first dance. Helen, who had always possessed more diplomatic skills than her brothers, smiled serenely. They're handling a family matter. It's nothing to worry about. But Janet's eyes had found Ruby, who was happily eating wedding cake and charming Tom with a detailed explanation of her favorite cartoon characters. The calculation was swift and devastating. Oh my God, Janet breathed. Oh my God, that's why. Victoria needs to know immediately. Victoria already knows, Helen said calmly. By the time Marcus returned from his call to Dr. Patricia Wells, the family counselor he'd found through a desperate internet search, the reception had transformed into something resembling a wake. Guests clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. The joy had leaked out of the celebration like air from a punctured balloon. He found Victoria in the bridal suite, still in her wedding dress, but with her hair down, staring at herself in the mirror. I've been thinking, she said without turning, around about what this means for us. Marcus sat heavily in the chair beside her. Victoria, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known. What would you have done? She asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror's reflection. If you'd known 4 years ago that Cassandra was pregnant, the question hung between them, honest and terrible in its implications. I don't know, Marcus admitted. I loved her. But I love you too. Differently, but genuinely. Victoria nodded slowly. I know you do. And that's what makes this so hard. She turned to face him directly. Marcus, I've spent the last hour thinking about what kind of marriage we'd have with this between us. You have a daughter. You have a history with her mother that obviously isn't finished. It is finished, Marcus protested. Cassandra and I ended years ago. Did you? Victoria asked gently. Because, from where I was standing, in that parking lot, it looked like something that was just beginning. The truth in her words cut deep. Marcus had felt it too, an old connection with Cassandra, complicated now by Ruby's existence, but undeniably present. I want to do the DNA test, Marcus said. I need to know for certain. You already know, Victoria said. Anyone with eyes can see she's yours. Dr. Wells had agreed to meet them the following Monday, along with a family law attorney she recommended. The legal complexities alone were staggering: paternity establishment, custody arrangements, child support calculations, but the emotional complexity was infinitely more challenging. Victoria stood and began removing her jewelry with careful precision. I'm going to pack a bag and stay with my sister for a few days. We both need time to think about what we want. Victoria, please, Marcus said. Don't make any permanent decisions tonight. She paused in removing her earrings. Marcus, I married you because I thought we wanted the same life. Quiet, stable, predictable. You have a daughter now. Your life is never going to be quiet or predictable again. The weight of truth settled over them both. Victoria continued. And the woman who gave you that daughter is downstairs at our wedding reception. And when you look at her, your face changes. In a way it never changes when you look at me. Marcus wanted to protest, but the words died in his throat because Victoria was right. I'm not angry, Victoria said, surprising him. I'm sad and I'm hurt, but I'm not angry. Sometimes life just happens to us. She kissed his forehead gently, a gesture more sisterly than romantic. Take care of your daughter, Marcus, and figure out what you really want before you make any more promises you might not be able to keep. As Victoria gathered her overnight bag, Marcus realized that his perfect day had become the catalyst for the most honest conversation of his adult life. And somewhere downstairs, his daughter was probably charming his entire extended family, while her mother navigated the impossible social dynamics of a reception that had become something else entirely. The fairy tale was over. Real life, messy, and complicated and full of difficult choices, was just beginning. Asterisk. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the same coffee shop where he'd first fallen in love with Cassandra 7 years earlier, watching his daughter attempt to build a tower from sugar packets while explaining the intricate social dynamics of her preschool class. Ruby had inherited his methodical approach to creative projects and Cassandra's gift for storytelling, creating elaborate narratives about why certain sugar packets were friends and others were merely acquaintances. And then Zoe said that pink is better than purple, but I told her that's silly because colors don't compete with each other, Ruby said seriously, balancing another packet on her precarious structure. They're just different kinds of beautiful. That's very wise, Marcus said, steadying the tower before it could topple. The simple gesture felt monumental 6 months ago. He wouldn't have known to anticipate her engineering disasters or understood her need to categorize the world through elaborate metaphors. The DNA test had been a formality, confirming what everyone already knew. The legal arrangements had been more complicated but ultimately straightforward. Joint custody, with Ruby spending weekdays with Cassandra and weekends with Marcus, plus alternating holidays and 2 weeks each summer. What couldn't be legally mandated was the delicate process of building trust between 3 adults, who had been irrevocably changed by one little girl's existence. Cassandra approached their table, carrying 2 coffee cups and a hot chocolate crowned with an architectural marvel of whipped cream and marshmallows. Ruby's eyes lit up as if she'd never seen such splendor, though Marcus had learned this was her standard reaction to any dessert more complex than a cookie. Dr. Wells called this morning, Cassandra said, settling into the chair across from Marcus. She wants to schedule a family session next week to discuss Ruby's adjustment to the custody schedule. How do you think she's doing? Marcus asked, watching Ruby attempt to drink her hot chocolate without disturbing the whipped cream mountain. Better than expected, Cassandra admitted. She likes having 2 bedrooms, and she's proud of having what she calls extra family. Helen and Tom have been wonderful with her. It had been Helen who'd suggested the coffee shop meetings, neutral territory where Marcus and Cassandra could navigate their co-parenting relationship without the charged atmosphere of either of their homes. What had started as tense, formal discussions about pickup times and dietary restrictions had gradually evolved into something more comfortable, though still carefully bounded. Victoria signed the divorce papers yesterday, Marcus said quietly, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. Cassandra's hand stilled on her cup. How are you feeling about that? It was a question that would have been impossibly loaded 6 months ago. But their shared focus on Ruby's well-being had created a space for honest conversation that Marcus found surprisingly healing. Sad, he said simply.
Ow.
Relieved. Guilty about. Feeling relieved. She deserves better than someone who is settling for stability instead of choosing love. You weren't settling, Cassandra said gently. You were building something real with her. What happened with us? It's complicated. Everything. Ruby looked up from her hot chocolate mustache. Hey, are you talking about grown-up feelings again? A little bit, Marcus said. Okay, can I have another marshmallow? The casual acceptance of adult complexity was something Marcus was still learning to navigate. Ruby had adapted to their unusual situation with the resilience of childhood. But she'd also begun asking questions that required careful, age-appropriate honesty about family structures and why some people lived together while others didn't. There's something else, Cassandra said, waiting until Ruby returned her attention to marshmallow architecture. I got offered a position with Doctors Without Borders, communications director for their North American operations. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Where? Here in the city. It's actually a promotion for my current job. Better benefits, more stable hours. I've been hesitant to take it because it would mean longer-term commitment to staying here, and I wasn't sure. She trailed off, but Marcus understood what she wasn't saying. 6 months ago, Cassandra had been prepared to disappear again if the situation became too complicated. The job offer represented roots, permanence, a decision to build a life that included him as Ruby's father. Should take it, Marcus said. Ruby needs stability, and you deserve career growth. Even if it means we're all going to be in each other's lives for the foreseeable future. The question hung between them, heavy with implication. 6 months of careful co-parenting had rebuilt their friendship. But it had also reignited the connection that had never fully died. They'd been scrupulously appropriate, never crossing boundaries. But the attraction was still there, deeper now, complicated by shared responsibility and genuine partnership in raising Ruby. Especially because of that, Marcus said. Ruby's tower finally succumbed to architectural impossibility, sugar packets scattering across the table. She looked at the mess with philosophical acceptance. Sometimes things fall down so you can build them different, she announced. Marcus caught Cassandra's eye across the table, and they shared a smile that acknowledged their daughter's accidental wisdom. Speaking of building things differently, Cassandra said, Ruby has something she wants to ask you. Ruby straightened in her chair with the solemnity of someone about to deliver important news. Daddy, will you come to my school's family day? We're supposed to bring our people, and I want to bring both my people. The word daddy still hit Marcus like a small miracle every time. Ruby had started using it tentatively about 2 months into their custody arrangement, testing the word like she might test ice on a pond. Now it emerged naturally, casually, as if he'd been her daddy all along instead of a stranger who'd stumbled into her life at a wedding reception. I would love to come to family day, Marcus said. What are we supposed to do there? We make art projects and eat cookies and tell everyone about our families. I'm going to tell them about how my daddy takes pictures and my mama helps sick people and how Uncle Tom taught me to play chess. That sounds perfect, Marcus said. Later, after they'd walked Ruby to Cassandra's car and negotiated the complex logistics of the next custody exchange, Marcus found himself alone with Cassandra on the sidewalk. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of changing leaves. And the promise of winter? Marcus, Cassandra said, then stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. What is it? Are we going to talk about this? She asked. About what's happening between us? It was the conversation they'd both been avoiding. The acknowledgement that 6 months of careful friendship had been building toward something more complicated and potentially wonderful. I don't want to mess this up, Marcus said. What we have. Now, with Ruby it works. I don't want to risk that for something that might not, double quotes, might not what? Cassandra challenged gently. Might not be worth it. Might not last. Marcus, we created a human being together. We're already risked everything. She stepped closer, and Marcus caught the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with Ruby's strawberry shampoo and coffee shop vanilla. I'm not the same person who ran away 4 years ago. You're not the same person who was trying to build a safe, predictable life with someone else. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe Ruby was right about things falling down so you can build them different? Cassandra's smile was tentative but genuine. I'm saying I'd like to see what we might build together now as the people we've become. Marcus looked down the street where Ruby's car seat was visible through the rear window, her small hand waving at them both. His daughter had already changed his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. Maybe it was time to let her mother change. It again, too. Okay, he said simply. Okay, let's see what we can build. Cassandra's laugh was bright with possibility. Fair warning, it probably won't be anything like what we planned. The best things never are, Marcus said. Thinking of sugar packet towers and unexpected daughters and the way love could arrive disguised as disruption, changing everything for the better. 6 months ago, his wedding day had ended with everything falling apart. Today felt like the beginning of everything falling into place messier than he'd once preferred. It's more complicated than he'd ever imagined, and more real than anything he'd ever built before. As they walked back toward their separate cars and their intertwined lives, Marcus realized that sometimes the best love stories didn't start at the altar. Sometimes they started in the ruins of carefully laid plans, built from the pieces of what came before, creating something entirely new and infinitely more true. Asterisk.